Welcome to Grief Sucks Life After Loss, where we talk all things grief. Thanks for being with us today, and we hope you enjoy this episode. Hi, Amy. Thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me and creating this space for people to share their stories and their hearts.
Yeah, well, you have a story that I think a lot of people can relate to, and that's often not talked about. So I'm going to let you take it over and share your story with us.
Yeah, so I have experienced the loss of two of my babies. I have 6 living children, and that's as wild as it sounds like it might be. But I always wanted to be a mom. Always wanted to get married, have kids. Like that was just I grew up pretty religious. I am still,
Mhm.
but we really believe in family and babies and all of that. And so that was kind of just something that was really, really important to me. And I was lucky enough to be able to create that dream for myself. But after we had had 4 children, um, we ended up taking a little break and then decided I was like, I still feel like there's more. And we're able to get pregnant again and had basically a textbook pregnancy. And I had had 4 girls and I was pregnant with my 5th girl. And we were like, I don't have any sisters. I only have brothers. I was just super excited. And we're like, we know how to do this. We just recycle the clothes. We recycling, like everything. It's all good. We know what we're doing. So everything was going great right up until the end. I had felt some contractions. My mom had flown into town. Like, I live in the States now and I'm from Canada. My mom flew in to be there. We'd gone hiking. We were like nesting, like doing all the washing the baby clothes and getting everything ready. We were so excited. And I had these 4 little girls. I think they were about like ages 9 down to 3 or 4. And they were so excited for their baby sister and just all the things that you do. You're
Mhm.
just busy. And a few days before my due date, I did feel some contractions or what I thought was contractions in the night. And so I stayed up, I walked. This wasn't my first rodeo, so I was just really excited. I'd had to be induced a few times for different reasons. And this time I was like, yes, I'm like going into labor on my own. And yeah, I remember staying up and walking and writing down in my little notepad my contractions. And they kept going, but they weren't going anywhere. And at some point in the night, I mean, like the early morning, I was like, they kind of petered out. So I just went to bed. When I woke up, I realized I hadn't felt her kicking for a little bit. And I was trying to think, when did I feel her kicking last? But we'd had babies before that, took a nap. And
Right.
so eventually I just called my doctor. And weirdly enough, I would say I am I can jump into it later, but as far as stillbirth prevention, there are some stillbirths that can be prevented. Spoiler alert. Um, she, yeah, like you should go into labor and delivery right away. You shouldn't drink juice. Babies don't slow down at the end. They could be napping, but it's really good to go get checked anyways. So yeah, I called my doctor's clinic and they were like, well, we'll just get you in this afternoon. They didn't even say like, come to the hospital now. Let's check you out now. We'll fit you in. And so I waited at home and was just kind of like poking the baby, doing all the things. And not feeling super great, but no signs, no symptoms, nothing was wrong.
Right.
And we went in to the doctor. And one of the crazy things is I normally had my appointments on Tuesday, but my doctor just had something that Tuesday. And so we made the appointment for Thursday. And now this is Wednesday. So it was like Tuesday night where I was feeling the contractions, all of those things. It's Wednesday. So we go see a different doctor who's there on Wednesdays. And I think this is kind of one of the hardest parts for anybody that's been through the loss of a baby is they put the Doppler on you and they're moving it around and they're moving it around and they're trying to see, like, they're not getting a heartbeat. And I was 39 and a half weeks. Like, it should not be hard to find a heartbeat, but they didn't say anything. So they still go and they have this little in-office ultrasound thing. And so they go and they're looking at the baby. And he still doesn't say anything. But at that point, thankfully my husband was able to go with me. Because on our fifth kid, he didn't always go. But yeah. Then they said, hey, let's have you go to the big ultrasound at the hospital and get things checked out. And so we walked over, the clinic was right next to the hospital. We walked over and it's like, you know what's happening, but like nobody will say it. And so I remember waiting in that waiting room for the ultrasound tech to get there and just thinking, my first thought was, how do I tell my kids? How do I tell these little precious girls at home who think that I'm at the hospital to get their baby sister that that's not what's going to happen? And a lot of people have different reactions in kind of a crisis or a death or grief. I am like a quiet. So I go inside and just quiet. And so I remember just that. And that's a thing when you lose a baby. It's like it's a lot of quiet when you hope there would be noise. But I just remember sitting there and thinking, how do we do this? What is even happening? And so we do go to the big ultrasound and they turned off the screen. So they have like a big TV that the mom, whoever's laying on the table can see it. And they turned that off and went through. And again, I think everyone was in shock. We lived in a small town. They didn't see a ton of losses, but yeah, they just like weren't saying anything. And the ultrasound tech, often they're not supposed to, they're supposed to wait, do their thing and tell the doctor, and the doctor comes and tells you. But yeah, I mean, we knew what was happening. And, they did eventually say that, the baby had passed away, that there wasn't any heartbeat anymore. And they really didn't know what else, like why that was happening. So yeah, that was kind of the start of my journey in grief. And it has been, so she would be 11 years old now. So it's been a minute, but I think it put me on a path where I am now helping people who have experienced this. But I mean, the next steps, I think one of the misconceptions about baby loss is that the baby just disappears or something. But no matter what stage you're at, the baby has to be birthed in some way. And in my case, it was an induction. So we did go straight over. Again, I think everyone was in shock. It's like I could have gone home. We lived really close to the hospital. I could have gone home, packed a bag, talked to my kids, like talked to my mom, gathered myself, but they just took me straight to a room. And my husband ended up having to go home and share the news. And I think he maybe did grab a few things. But yeah, I remember just standing there in that hospital room basically by myself. They're like, change into this gown and we're going to get your IV started and all this stuff, and it was pretty tough. And yeah, just devastating. So I did go through labor, and I think something happens, as women, as parents, whatever it is. I mean, as human beings, all of us, somehow you dig deep and find this power that you didn't know you have, or you just like the shock takes over. And so for me, that was, I've been induced before. I know what I want. I know what to do. I'm going to get this baby out. And that was my goal. Beyond that, I didn't know what it would.
That was the immediate, what do I need to do right now to get through?
Yeah.
Yeah. So as a mom, as any parent losing a child, I just can't fathom, because it's very much different than losing someone else in your life. But how do you, because not only do you have to get yourself through, you have to get your daughters through. And how did that go, or what did you do to help the girls go through this?
Yeah, so it was really important to us that they would come and meet the baby. And I know that that's something people are really scared about, because I have, in part of my volunteer work, I help people going through similar things in the hospital and help them to make memories. And I know that whether or not kids should meet a baby who has passed away is a big question. Like, am I going to traumatize my kids? Or how do I tell them? What do I do? And we just chose to have them come over. So we ended up going through labor, having the baby in the middle of the night. And we had them come in the morning and had a photographer come. And it was a beautiful, heartbreaking thing. Different ones reacted differently. Our littlest, she just treated the baby like it was the baby, no fear. She just wanted to hold her and love her and cuddle her. And, other ones were nervous. Like, I was nervous. That's the thing too. Like, nobody tells you. I remember just thinking, like, what do I do? Like, I don't want to, like, how do you hold a baby that's passed
There's
away?
no guide to navigate
Yeah.
something like this. And especially when it's happening all of a sudden and you're just, quickly going through the motions and everything, the process. It's, what do? You do
Yeah.
whatever kicks in survival mode, I guess, would be the best thing.
Yeah. And thankfully, I had someone who is actually ended up being a friend, and she was just so heartbroken when she found out, like, I had lost our daughter. But she came to help and kind of helped us, like, dress the baby and do the pictures, make some memories, make some hand and feet molds, do things that are so pivotal, I believe, in giving yourself a good start to the grief journey. And some people don't get that. Like, the standard of care is really all over the board, especially like in the US, probably Canada too, where it's just like, you don't know if the hospital's going to have things for the baby, little clothes, like memory kits, all sorts of things, or they just might have nothing.
Right.
So it's kind of tough. But we were lucky we had someone there to say, like, it's okay to take pictures and we're going to help you. And it's okay, to spend time with the baby. I wish we would have spent more time. A lot of people, that's a thing too. It's like, you're in the hospital, you're in shock, you don't know what to do. To be honest, since this is a grief podcast, I'll just say I was really worried about, like, the condition of her body. because they kind of turn, like they come out and they look like they're still a baby. And
Right.
depending on the gestational age, there's like different things that can be affecting the body and stuff. But I was just like afraid that she would turn, or I don't know. People say they turn, they're coloring different stuff. So I just like really want to have good memories in the hospital.
Yeah.
So yeah, with our kids, my coping mechanism was reading. I heard someone say, I don't know if this is right, but it was like bibliotherapy. It's like just using learning and knowledge to help you through. And so I just dove into any books I could find, and I really wanted to find out, how do I help my kids?
Hmm.
How do I talk to them? Like, how do I help them process this? How do I be a good mom? How do I take care of myself? How do I heal myself? How do I keep my relationship intact during this like really difficult time in our life and in our relationship? So, yeah, I just dove into all that and tried to do the best I could. And I'm sure I made lots of mistakes, but we overall as a family have tried to be really open about it. We tried to use like accurate, age appropriate wording instead of like, the baby's an angel or we lost the baby,
Yeah,
right?
because
Like you've,
lost it could mean something else.
yeah, yeah. Or the baby went to sleep, right? Because we'll say born
Yeah.
sleeping. It's like they're going to internalize that and think, "Oh, if I fall asleep, I might die too."
Yeah, you have to think about things like that.
Yeah. So we tried to just really explain, and we never got a super clear idea of what happened. We think it was like a partial placental abruption. And so she just passed. So we kind of just told the kids the reality of what that looks like and what happened and why she stopped living. And we did have a funeral. We chose to bury her. And thankfully, well, I guess it's one of those little miracles that's kind of a tough one, but my husband's sister had passed away in a car accident years earlier. And so at the time, the family had bought all their cemetery plots. And so they actually had a place for a daughter. We named her Lauren. So she had a place. And so we were able to bury her, have a funeral. But I remember one of the weirdest little details was she passed in March. She was due on St. Patrick's Day. And we found out she passed on the 13th. We had her on the 14th. And so it was Easter season. And so I had at the time we lived in a really small town. And so I actually had my mother-in-law go to Costco. Costco has like the super cutest, like special occasion, like Easter and Christmas dresses. And so I was like, maybe you could go get dresses for my girls. And so we have just like these pictures. I had a friend that I actually asked if she would come and take pictures at a funeral, which I would have been like, that's really weird. But like, we didn't get time.
Yeah.
It's like you don't have all the memories. And so, yeah, I just have pictures of these sad little girls in their cute matching dresses. And I actually kept those. Well, like they passed down through the ages. And so one by one, they would outgrow them, until they couldn't be passed down. Now my girls are all teenagers. And I did end up going through them at one point and just saying, I don't need to keep all four of these. But I did keep one, because that's the dress that they wore to their sister's funeral. And it's that memory and that one tangible thing, that we can hang on to. Uh, but yeah, we definitely do keep her in our family. and talk about her and have like a little shadow box on the wall. And I did go on pretty quickly after to become pregnant again. Not to replace Lauren, because that's another thing. A lot of times, and it's different with all losses, but especially with baby loss, people just think we'll just have another one. Right. And maybe with spouses too, they're like, oh, when do you think you'll date again?
Yeah.
But it's like this replacing thing. And a lot of people are afraid, like they don't want to replace their baby. But like we had a brand new nursery. I had put together a crib like 9 months pregnant because my first four had used like this hand me down secondhand crib we needed to update. And I'm like, I have this empty crib. We were so ready for a baby. And I kind of threw up my hands. Again, everyone reacts differently, but I was like, well, if I don't have any control, like I thought,
Hmm.
it's funny how we think we have control of these things.
Right.
But I was like, if I don't have control, then like whatever, we'll just like leave it up to nature, to God, to whatever. So we were just like, if we have another baby, we have another baby. And I did get pregnant again. So that was really, really tough. And so pregnancy after loss is something that's near and dear to my heart. And it's something that I help people with because the very thing you want is also the thing that is just terrifying because you're like willingly putting yourself in the position to get your heart broken again. And it ended up that I was pregnant really almost like a deja vu of
Mhm.
the year before. So I ended up being due in April. My daughter Lauren was due in March of the year before. And so I spent that year of like, excuse me, really hard grieving, also being pregnant again, also counting the weeks, also just, yeah. So it was,
Was it
I would
terrifying?
say, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely terrifying. I did have a counselor. Eventually, I was like, okay, I need someone to talk to. Like, I need help. Like, I just can't stop being scared.
Hmm.
And it's more than that. Like, I think it's more than just because a lot of people are like, if you could just tell yourself, like, it's a different baby and it'll be a different outcome. It doesn't work because it's like in your body, it's in your nervous system. Like, again, the thing you're most afraid of, the thing that really hurts you, is happening again. So, yeah, I did a lot of breathing exercises and a lot of just like letting myself process through and also just like white knuckling it a lot,
Yeah.
like as you do. And yeah, but that baby was born and lived, and um, he's 10 now and he's amazing. We had a boy. So, but he's given me a run for my money because he came out one of those wild,
Well,
like
please.
daredevil. Like we never had an ER visit with any of the, no ER visits, no broken bones, no stitches, nothing. And then
Mhm.
this child is like, he was 100% speed.
Boys are
Um,
different. I know. I always joked. I was like, I don't know that I was meant to be a boy mom. This is rough. My girl, easy. My boy, I was like, oh goodness.
yeah. So it's a daily, I feel like almost a daily practice of mine that I've had to. And thankfully, I've gotten lots of practice of just like, because after someone dies close to you, you're scared of it.
Hmm.
Like, of course
Yeah.
you are. And so to lose a child in that way and then to have another one, it's like I really have to say I want him to live. Like I want my kids to live. I don't want my fear to affect their life. Right? Like I want him. Like right now he really wants to ride his bike to school, and we have to cross like this road that's a little, it makes me nervous.
Hmm.
But I'm also like, but I want him to live. So of course I'm going to make smart parenting
Yeah.
decisions, but I have to try to not, parent from that fear and trust that, you know, like it's okay for him to live his life and be wild, all of those things. And same with my others. Like I have teenagers that are driving, and you just have to lots of deep breaths and
Being a parent is scary,
yeah,
period. It's rough.
yes. Yeah, so wrapping up my crate, I'm like my first 4 babies were like super easy. It's like so not easy, but things
Easier.
went well. And the last 4 were just a lot. We did it might sound like who would really do this? But I was like, I think that there's more babies for a family. So we did get pregnant again. We had just moved to a new area. My little boy turned 2, and we had a great ultrasound at like 11 weeks. Baby was bouncing. Everything was great. We got pictures, thankfully. And then at 14 weeks, same exact thing. We couldn't find heartbeat on the Doppler. Did the in-office ultrasound. Sent us over to the hospital where they confirmed that this baby had passed away. And my husband was on the other side of the country. I was alone that time.
Oh, goodness.
We had just told our kids, and that was another different kind of devastating, because even though like they say that about 1 in 4 known pregnancies ends in miscarriage, I know that getting out of the first trimester isn't
Mhm.
automatically like you're good to go. But like we got to 14 weeks and I had been so nervous and like just always kind of checking and hoping that everything was okay. And so to lose the baby right when we were like, maybe we can hope, like maybe we can believe that this is going to be okay, was really, really tough. I We ended up opting to do surgery, which is called the DNC, where they just
Mhm.
kind of like remove everything in the baby. And because we wanted some answers and we were hoping we could get some answers with some testing and things. And it ended up, I basically immediately started hemorrhaging during that surgery. What was supposed to be, our doctor was like, you have to fast and you go in really early to do it. And she was like, you'll be home 20 minutes, time for breakfast. I was like, that's kind of a weird I don't know.
Right.
Anyways, but that was kind of what she said. Like, we'll just get you taken care of and we'll send you home and you can eat. It ended up being 90 something minutes of them trying to not let me bleed to death. And so I woke up staring at the ceiling with the doctor just saying, Amy, you lost a lot of blood. We're going to take you to the hospital. So that was pretty terrifying. So on top of like losing that child that we were so excited about, that I just told my kids about, to go through that trauma. And then it was like really touch and go for a certain amount of time. Like they gave me a lot of blood in the OR, but like I needed more. And there was a point where every doctor in the entire hospital was standing in my room. So that was really scary.
Yeah.
And I stayed overnight. I finally kind of like things started coming together. We do, like I said, I am religious, and we had a friend and people came and like blessed me, and they got me some more blood. And so I think with some divine intervention and some medical intervention, we got things stabilized. But I went home. I couldn't stand. It took me about a week to even be able to like stand up. So I just laid in bed and was really, really sad and felt exhausted from the anesthesia, from the loss of blood, from all of it. And like I said, I had just moved to a new town. And I will say that, as you probably know, the people that did show up meant so much.
Mhm.
because we hadn't even told anybody I was pregnant. I had to make that Facebook post because this ended up being the day before my birthday. And I was sitting in the hospital. I think my husband had gone home to like check on the kids. And I remember just posting, like, please don't wish me happy birthday. Like, I'm in the hospital. We just lost a baby. I lost a ton of blood. Like, just don't wish me happy birthday. But people were so kind. And I did have like total strangers came and like brought me flowers and visited with me. And, people brought me food and dinner, and my neighbors showed up. And so it was just another beautiful lesson. After Lauren, we'd had so many kind things done for us. But yeah, it really just meant a lot to me that people were kind. And that was just a really different, you can't really compare losses. It was different and hard. And I had a lot of feelings. We did end up, like, to add the insult to injury, going through all of that so we could get some answers. I really wanted to know the gender of the baby. I really felt that was important so we could like name them and like identify kind of with them. And so we wait and wait and wait for these answers. We wait for the test results, only to get a call from my doctor saying, Amy, I'm sorry. Somebody mislabeled.
No.
And they did something like they put, I say the baby, the remain. There's so many words that are just awful in pregnancy loss. Like the tissue. Anyways. Yeah, so they basically put some sort of preservative that made it so you can't test what we wanted to test. So that was really devastating. That was like another loss.
Yeah.
Because then like we didn't get to know that. And I really wanted to. And then in that blur of like the disappointment, I never asked like what happens to the baby, to the,
Mm-hmm.
And so that was really hard because with Lauren, we were able to bury her. Like
Right.
we know where she is, we can visit her. And with that loss and that surgery, I lost that. And it wasn't until like I kind of like came up for air, I was like, oh, like I don't even know what they do. And so I struggled a lot blaming myself because for many people that lose babies, like, again, just to be honest, it's like you're flushing them down the toilet sometimes, or they're going in medical waste. That's what I assume, is that my baby went in medical waste. And so I really blame myself for like I just told myself forever that I threw my baby in the garbage. Like,
Well, and it really sucks that the medical teams don't take the time to explain something like that. They do what they have to do and then move on to the next. But as the parent, as the person going through that, I think it's important to share that information because you're not always mentally thinking. You're not. That's just not always one of those things that you're just automatically going to ask. And I think that's heavily on them to start explaining that to people that's going through these things.
yeah. And I know, again, it's so different in different places, right? In some places they'll like cremate all the babies and they have a little spot in like a cemetery, or you can get them back, or they would give you information. And I think in this case, it just fell through the cracks. And so I had to do a lot of work to forgive myself for that, even though like I didn't do anything wrong. But there's always a lot of blame around loss, especially pregnancy loss, because it does feel like it's your job to protect and care for your baby. But we did name that baby River. We decided to pick a gender neutral, like nature. We're like outdoorsy people, and we kind of got some ideas together. My kids voted on it, and so we picked River. So we do have a name, and I look forward to getting to know more about them, on the other
Yeah.
side. And it's funny because I kind of had an idea of the gender, but my youngest, we did have a baby after River who lived, and he had the opposite idea of me. And I'm like, well, you're probably right, because you probably got to chat with them at some point,
Yeah.
as their paths crossed. But yeah, it's been a wild journey. And like I said, that last baby was another real test of like faith. Some people might think it was like a really not smart decision, but I just couldn't shake it. I just was like, there's somebody else. And so I ended up having a really high risk pregnancy, ended up with preeclampsia, which I'd never had before, had him at 35 weeks. And I would, yeah, do it all over again because he's amazing. He's 7 now. But it was tough. It was really tough. So even like I had 3 pregnancy after loss, each one, like 4 living kids, stillbirth, rainbow baby is what we call them, a miscarriage, and another rainbow baby. And so, yeah, it's been a journey. And like I said, teaching them about grief, I hope, because I have done a lot of volunteer work, I do this as my job also, is like helping people.
Let's say, tell us about that, because often we go through these challenging things and loss, and some of us find a way to come out of it helping other people, um, helping other people get through the things that we went through.
Yeah. Yeah. So I just hope that I hope that my kids I've been a good example of them, of like how to help and support people who are going through hard things. So I do now, I'm a grief coach. So I help people navigating life after baby loss and pregnancy after loss. I do just virtual like Zoom
Mm-hmm.
meetings, which is awesome. I love, because I've had clients as far as South Africa, and it's
Wow.
so cool. Really just helping people navigate this, because I do think it's a bit of a taboo. Like, as a culture, we're not really good with grief, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
Pregnancy loss, like losing a baby, it's like nobody wants to talk about that. That's scary and depressing. We don't want to, make people worried. But there's a lot of people experiencing this kind of heartbreak. And a lot of us feel really isolated and alone.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the more resources, the better. So I do have a podcast also. It's called Smooth Stones. My website is just smoothstonescoaching.com. And that really came from I went to a conference right after Lauren died. Like 6 weeks later, there was this women's conference at the university I graduated from. And I went to all the classes on like getting through hard things and grief and trials and dealing with challenges. And somebody talked about, and maybe you've heard it or some version of it, but it's the idea that grief is like a rock in your shoe. And at first it's really pokey and sharp, and it just is tearing you apart. You can't walk, you can't breathe, like it hurts so bad. But as you move forward, the sharp edges start to break off. You start to learn how to walk with it, like where to position it in your shoe so that you can continue walking. But really often it hits a nerve, it hits a soft place, it hurts, and it like brings you back to your knees. But then as you keep going, you keep working at it, eventually the rock becomes smooth, your foot, the skin becomes stronger. You kind of find this little spot where you can nestle that little stone in there. And it really and when you feel it, it's just a reminder of your person that you lost.
Mm-hmm.
And that stuck with me so much because I was really determined that this was not going to like beat me, that I was going to figure this out, that I was going to do. Like, I looked at other people who had been through challenges, like so many of our like world leaders and like people that we admire. It's like they had also been through loss and they did really cool things. So that's why I named everything Smooth Stones, was because I was like, that's what I want people to know, is that there is hope and you can do this. And also, you don't have to walk alone. Like, how much easier is it if you have someone to put your arm around to carry
Somebody who
you?
understands.
Yeah, while you're kind of limping and
Mhm.
figuring it out. So, yeah, it's been a beautiful thing to do. And like you said, I don't think anybody has to like start a huge foundation or a charity or like a big, or become a grief coach or start a podcast. I just think, for me, how I would describe it, because I talk to parents, is just like we have this parenting energy that we didn't get to give to our babies. And so a lot of us just feel like we're banging our head against the wall and we're so sad, when it's like, what if you just like allowed that out and give it a place, right? So whether it's parenting your living children, whether it's like volunteering or doing something related to your loss, or whether it's just parenting, like taking care of yourself, if we just say, yeah. So like if you've lost a spouse, it's like you still have that love, right? You still have that energy you still give to your spouse. And so I think if we can just find a way to give ourselves permission. That's the funny thing. It's like sometimes we have to give ourselves permission.
Absolutely.
Like a lot of people are like, can I have a party for my baby that died? Is
You can
that
do whatever
weird?
you want to do.
And it's like, yeah.
Absolutely.
So a lot of times it's like, yes, like do what's in your heart, let it come out, because that is really something that's so, so healing, right? And you don't have to tell yourself that you can't. Like, we wish we were holding and loving and caring for a person in a physical way.
And I think with infant loss, there's some sort of stigma, or a lot of people worry about what other people think too, because you were with that baby for so long. But the fact of the matter was, you carried that child. That was your child. It doesn't matter if they lived for long or they didn't, or whatever the situation, that was still your child. And I think a lot of people struggle with either having that funeral, or like you said, taking the time, taking the photos, or having the party for just general, I guess, thinking what other people are going to think about that. At the end of the day, it's none of their business. If it helps you, do it. If it
Yeah.
helps you, your family, your kids, we're all doing the best that we can. And
Yeah.
we have to do what works for us.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think there is this judgment, and this is a hard thing with grief. It's like there's a hierarchy, right? Like if you were 6 weeks pregnant, you're allowed to be this sad
Mm-hmm.
for this long. You know, if your baby died of SIDS when they were 6 months old, you're allowed to be this sad
Yeah.
for this long. And the worst part about that is, number one, people do feel the need to like say things to you, but it's that internal, like we internalize it. And I'm sure it's similar with like a spouse, like, oh, how long were you married? And, or, what was your situation? Like, I've had friends who just got divorced and then their
Mm-hmm.
ex husband died. And it's like, well, what am I allowed to feel?
Yeah.
So I think it's like that internal judgment, because a lot of people say, like, I was only this far along. Like, why am I still sad 2 years later?
Because that was your baby.
Yeah. And you had those dreams. That's the thing with pregnancy loss, is you envisioned a life. You saw them, they're on their first day of school. You saw them graduating. You saw them getting married. You saw your grandchildren.
Mm-hmm.
Like you saw, and because we can find out so early, and we can connect with our babies so early, that it really is. It's like, it's this huge loss that society in general is not really good at understanding how immense it is.
Unfortunately, yes. And I think that if we talk more about it and we have more people helping people get through it, that hopefully we can break that stigma, and people will know that they're not alone. and they can celebrate that or grieve that however they would like to do. But the main thing is just not walking in it alone because it's
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. And like I said, there's sometimes so much shame or blame around it, and it can happen like multiple times, and it just, I don't know, it's just really important, I think, that people acknowledge their own grief and also find the right support for
mhm.
them, whether it's a coach, a therapist, a support group, something online, like whatever it is, you definitely don't have to do it alone.
Is there any other than not doing it alone, is there any one or two things that pieces of advice that you could provide, maybe that helped you get through your losses?
I would say that there is hope. It will not always be as bad as it is right now. Like at the beginning, it's all consuming, and it's supposed to be, right? But where we get kind of stuck or make it worse for ourselves is when we think like it's going to be like this forever. It really won't. Time doesn't heal on its own, but time gives us distance and space and, perspective. And also, I really believe that if you learn about grief, if you hang out with people who speak grief, you can really normalize your experience and just like, oh, this is grief. Like, I'm not broken. There's nothing wrong with me. I'm just a human being who's really missing someone they love. And let yourself experience that. So the flip side of that is like when you get to know grief, I even say make grief your best friend because a lot of us are really trying to get rid of grief because we live in a society that's like all about being happy, right? And so we don't have a lot of tools to manage these uncomfortable emotions, but getting really good at them will help you so much more than trying to run away from them. And grief is patient, like it's always going to come. There's no wrong way to do this, right? If you've been pushing down your grief or like distracting yourself or eating or scrolling or like staying busy, whatever we do to kind of avoid it,
Mhm.
that's okay. You can still love yourself and also know that like at some point, whenever you're ready, if you want to take a look at some of these feelings, like they'll still be there and it's okay to feel them. It's okay that it's uncomfortable. And I think just really being your own best cheerleader and learning to love ourselves. I think the opportunity in grief is having so much more compassion for our fellow humans. I never felt more deeply that, that saying, everyone around you is fighting a hard battle you know
Mhm.
nothing about, than I did after Lauren died. And I would just like have my sunglasses and I'm standing there. I think it was probably the Easter egg hunt, our town Easter egg hunt, like 2 weeks after my daughter died, trying not to cry and just like watching everyone and thinking, these people don't know like that I'm just standing here hiding my tears, And so having compassion for those around us and just kind of like patience for that. And also really diving into self-compassion because we're also really bad at that.
Yeah.
We're really good at judging ourselves. We're not good at being kind to ourselves. And I think some people think if I'm kind to myself in grief, if I say I'm allowed to be sad as much as I need to, I'm allowed to cry as much as I need to, that we would fall in this deep, dark hole and never come out. But in my experience, the opposite is true. If you let yourself cry, it passes.
Mhm.
If you let yourself take a night off and just like stay in your pajamas and like eat chocolate and watch a show on Netflix, it passes, right? Like you get to the next day. So, yeah, there is always hope. Be kind to yourself and get to know grief. I think are some of the biggest things will help you. And it's all, yeah, it's really when you feel ready. So I'm never going to tell you how to do it, but I will say that I see those 3 things really help people.
I will link your website in the description as well, so that it'll be easy for everyone to find that. And I appreciate you being here with us today and sharing your story. I know it's often not easy to speak about this, but I'm sure it did help someone, if not multiple people today.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much.
We hope you enjoyed our conversation today. If you would like to join us on Facebook, you can find us at Grief Sucks Life After Loss. We look forward to seeing you again.